Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics and really try to equip you with a profound understanding. Today, we're diving deep into a word that gets thrown around a lot, sometimes casually, but it actually describes a serious, often devastating psychological disorder, narcissism. We're pulling insights from Judy Dyer's comprehensive guide, Narcissist, a complete guide for dealing with narcissism and creating the life you want. Our mission here is really to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, things to help you understand, identify, and crucially navigate relationships with narcissistic individuals.
And what's truly striking, I think, is just how prevalent this actually is. A study from San Diego State University even pointed to a possible, epidemic of narcissism among young people. They attributed it to things like celebrity culture, maybe more permissive parenting, and definitely the internet. Then there's psychologist Dr. Jean M. Twenge. She based a book on that study and highlighted a really concerning 67% increase in narcissism over the last couple of decades. She estimates that approximately maybe 10% of the population suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD.
10%. Wow. So the chances are you might very well be working with, living with, or even, in a relationship with someone who exhibits some traits of NPD. And while that can sound pretty unsettling, the good news from this deep dive, I suppose, is that you are definitely not alone and you don't have to stay stuck in that situation. Historically, narcissism was often considered, untreatable, wasn't it?
It was, for a long time. But over the last 40 years or so, mental health professionals have actually identified successful ways to manage and even treat the condition. It's not hopeless.
Okay, good. So let's unpack this. Where do we even start? Maybe with the origin of the word itself. To really understand narcissism, maybe we should start at its roots, back in ancient Greek mythology, right? The story of Narcissus. What can that old tale tell us about the modern condition?
Oh, the myth is incredibly poignant, actually, and it offers a really powerful lens. Narcissus, this handsome hunter,
Hmm.
admired by everyone, apparently, but he just showed contempt. And then there was Echo, an Oread nymph. She fell deeply in love with him, but he rejected her, and she, ultimately faded away into just a voice, just an echo. Then Nemesis, the goddess of revenge, she gets involved. She leads Narcissus to a river, and he becomes utterly captivated by his own reflection. But when he realized this beautiful image was unattainable, just a reflection, he fell into despair and took his own life.
Wow. That's a powerful story.
Yeah.
So what echoes, pardon the pun, of Narcissus and Echo do we see in modern narcissistic relationships? What are the lessons there about these destructive dynamics?
It mirrors them perfectly, I think. You have Narcissus, just too self-absorbed to even perceive genuine love directed towards him. And then Echo, desperately wanting to be heard, to be seen, only to be pushed aside and, ultimately destroyed by that indifference. It really highlights how a narcissistic person can be profoundly destructive, not just to themselves in the end, but also to anyone who genuinely tries to love them.
It's fascinating how that ancient wisdom kind of maps onto modern psychology. So, okay, beyond the myth, how does modern psychology actually define a narcissist? What are the core characteristics we should be looking for?
Right. Modern psychology identifies clear clinical traits for NPD. Individuals with this disorder typically show very little, sometimes no, compassion or empathy for others' feelings. They often demean people, sort of put them down, as a way to enforce their own perceived superiority. They are profoundly self-absorbed, find criticism incredibly difficult to handle, and they habitually exploit others. It's all for their own power or just to maintain that feeling of being superior.
Okay, so lack of empathy, self-absorption, exploiting others. What about other sort of overt behaviors? Anything else listeners should be watching out for?
Yeah, beyond those core traits, they are definitely prone to explosive rage outbursts, sudden, intense anger. They also tend to lie and distort the truth quite readily for personal gain, and they're almost entirely incapable of admitting when they're wrong. That's a big one. Oh, and extreme jealousy. That's also a very significant hallmark. Now, it's worth noting, while all diagnosed NPD individuals show these traits, Judy Dyer points out there are variations. Psychologists are generally quite reluctant to diagnose children with NPD before, say, age 18.
Why is that?
Well, because many childhood behaviors, even difficult ones, are often learned and they can potentially be unlearned. Development plays a huge role. Fully fledged NPD, however, that's seen in adults and it's treated quite differently. Actually, psychologist Theodore Millian identified several subtypes, like the amorous narcissist, who uses seduction and sex for power, or the elitist narcissist, who genuinely believes they're just inherently better because of status or achievements.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, people often use terms like narcissist, sociopath, psychopath almost interchangeably. But our source makes some really critical distinctions. What are those key differences, and why is it so important for us to understand them?
That's a really excellent point, and yes, the differences are crucial. Dr. Scott Bond, a criminology professor, points out that psychopaths and sociopaths primarily suffer from antisocial behavior disorder. Now, they do share traits with narcissists like a disregard for law, callousness, lack of empathy, disrespect for others' rights. There's overlap.
Okay, so if there's so much overlap, where do they really diverge? What sets them apart?
Right, this is where it gets interesting. Psychopaths often have, long and varied criminal histories. They tend towards more direct physical or legal transgressions. Narcissists, on the other hand, their transgressions tend to be more psychological and emotional. Things like slander, sabotage, systematically devaluing their victims' lives. And crucially, narcissists seem capable of showing some guilt or remorse, even if it's fleeting or maybe superficial. Psychopaths and sociopaths often just can't, due to that profound lack of empathy and complete self-absorption. There's even evidence from brain scans. They show abnormalities in different areas. For narcissists, it's offering compassion-related areas. For psychopaths, it's more in areas linked to guilt and moral reasoning.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And another thing, narcissists have this unhealthy, almost desperate need for external validation. They crave admiration. Sociopaths and psychopaths, largely indifferent to it. Also, narcissists tend to exploit people they feel threatened by, whereas sociopaths might do it more for, sheer enjoyment or thrill.
But despite those distinctions, you mentioned they can both be incredibly callous in how they treat people, sometimes even deriving a kind of sadistic pleasure from harming others. Why is that?
Well, it seems to stem from this overwhelming desire for power and control, because they often can't experience the full, rich spectrum of human emotions themselves. They might find a kind of perverse pleasure, or at least a sense of power, in traumatizing and controlling their victims. It's a way for them to feel something, even if it's negative.
Right. A substitute for genuine feeling. Okay, let's shift to the dynamics within relationships. You said earlier you never truly know a narcissist.
That's the core issue, really. You must understand that the person you encounter publicly, the successful, charming, maybe even seemingly kind and generous one, that's a carefully constructed facade, a mask. That is not who they are behind closed doors. Their true colors, revealed only to those closest, are often cruel, selfish, abusive, hateful, and just utterly lacking in empathy.
And there's that common misconception, isn't there, that all narcissists are these high-flying, successful types. But the source makes it clear, some are, yes, but others might actually feel like failures deep down, just hiding insecurities behind this big display of superiority.
Exactly. They come in all shapes and sizes.
And interestingly, you can even find them in roles you wouldn't expect, like pastors or social workers, right? Roles where you'd think empathy is key. Why there?
It's strategic, often. Those positions offer opportunities to exert power and, crucially, gain access to more potential victims. It allows them to feign empathy, to wear that mask even more convincingly when they actually have none. So, regardless of profession or social standing, they can be dangerous people with zero genuine empathy. They truly believe they're entitled to things they haven't earned, and fundamentally, they lack any internal desire to change.
Okay, so given this hidden reality, this mask,
Yeah.
what actually fuels their interactions?
Yeah.
How do they keep people drawn in? Which brings us to that fundamental concept, narcissistic supply.
Yes, narcissistic supply. It's absolutely key. It's basically the admiration, the attention, the validation they crave constantly from their victims. They target people specifically for this reason. They are genuinely incapable of forming real emotional connections.
So it's not about connection at all. It's like a performance or fuel.
It's absolutely like fuel. And often it's a form of entertainment for them, too. They get bored very easily, profoundly bored sometimes. And frankly, nothing seems to entertain them more than watching others suffer or react to their manipulation. They literally see victims as accessories, like furniture or a handbag. They just can't grasp that these individuals have their own desires, wants, needs.
That sounds incredibly isolating and dehumanizing for the victim. And it probably explains why they often seem to fear genuine intimacy, right?
They do. They fear intimacy because it would inevitably expose their true self, that unbearable character underneath the mask. They become masters at faking emotions. They can turn on the waterworks, cry on demand with startling ease, and they adapt their character like a chameleon to whatever they think the other person wants to see. But it's solely for manipulation. They possess what's called cold empathy. It's an intellectual understanding of what someone might be feeling, but there's absolutely no emotional connection or resonance. They can read the room, but they don't feel it.
So even when they seem remorseful, crying maybe.
Even then, yeah. It's usually just a calculated tactic to avoid responsibility or regain control. In relationships, they often lure partners in with this intense false sense of security and intimacy at the start. There was a study, I think back in 2015, that found women wanting to marry were often quite attracted to narcissistic personalities.
Really?
Why? Because of that initial charm, their perceived ability to provide maybe higher social status. So despite their destructive reputation, they're still often viewed, unfortunately, as desirable partners initially.
It's that mask again. To outsiders, they appear kind, generous, maybe even spiritual. It's only those closest, the victims, who see the true malevolent side, this shield of splendor, as the book calls it. That's how they get away with it, isn't it? Because no one outside believes the victim.
Precisely. And victims themselves are often led to question their own sanity because the narcissist can switch from nice to nasty in a blink. It's incredibly disorienting.
So the key takeaway here is crucial. The cruel side is their true self. The nice side is the performance, the facade, and they are chillingly effective at fooling almost anyone.
It's a profoundly difficult truth to accept, isn't it, that someone's core character can be so lacking in genuine goodness or remorse? This often leads to what psychologists call cognitive dissonance for victims. These conflicting thoughts about an abusive partner living this double life, they're torn between the charming mask and the cruel reality.
And resolving that dissonance means?
It means facing the painful truth, accepting the abuse is real, rather than denying it or rationalizing it away. That allows the victim to align their perception with reality, which is the first step towards healing. There's simply no point trying to make a narcissist feel remorse. Their brains just aren't wired for it, it seems. Their sole aim is always to protect their fabricated identity, their mask. And this often results in something called narcissistic injury, this deep despair and rage when they're criticized or when their false sense of superiority is threatened in any way.
Okay, that leads us to another really dark aspect Judy Dyer covers extensively, gaslighting. She calls it an extreme form of mind manipulation that makes victims question their own sanity. Can you walk us through how this works, how it plays out?
It is truly insidious, and it manifests differently depending on the context. In, say, romantic relationships, it usually starts subtly. They might deny saying something you clearly remember, like, no, I said we had the appointment on Thursday, when you know they said Wednesday. It makes you doubt your hearing, your memory. Then maybe it escalates, denying preferences you know they have. What? I can't stand Chinese food, when you know they previously said it was their absolute favorite. From there, they might even fabricate entire conversations. You said I could use your credit card, remember? Making you doubt yourself so much you start to believe them, granting them control. And finally, they might move to outright blatant lies, denying actions they just took, like eating the food you just put in the oven and insisting you must have done it.
And it works. Because it's just so hard to believe someone would lie so boldly, so convincingly, right, about such small things even.
Exactly. Your own sense of reality relies on a certain level of trust. They exploit that. Each time it happens, your self-worth diminishes, and you start questioning everything you believe about yourself.
How does it look in families?
In family settings, gaslighting often happens between parents and children. Children are especially vulnerable because they rely on parents for guidance, for their whole sense of reality. A parent might blame a child for being late to school when it was clearly the parent's fault for not getting ready. This subtly teaches the child, I am bad, I am unreliable. Or they might dismiss a child's genuine grief over a pet dying. Oh, you didn't even love the cat anyway, you're just pretending for attention. It invalidates their real feelings. As children get older, the gaslighting adapts, maybe questioning their understanding. You completely misunderstood what I was trying to say. They might also try to undermine relationships with friends or partners, whispering things like, you know your friends are only using you because you've got a car, planting seeds of doubt.
And you mentioned twisting childhood memories earlier. That sounds particularly disturbing.
It is. A narcissistic parent might blame one child for a sibling's past misbehavior, insisting, you were such a terrible child, you made me ashamed, even if the child remembers it differently. Then, when that child grows up, the parent uses gaslighting to defend their own parenting. What are you talking about? You had the best upbringing imaginable. It rewrites history to protect their image.
Wow. Okay, and what about the workplace?
In the workplace, gaslighting is usually a tactic to gain or maintain power. A boss might deny assigning you a task, then reprimand you for doing it, saying you wasted time. Then, when you try to explain, they tell you to calm down.
Making you look unstable.
Exactly. Or they might deny a promised pay raise, suddenly criticizing your performance instead. Colleagues might do it too, subtly undermining you, saying things like, ooh, the boss is really fuming about your report, even if it's not true, or you're probably kept out of that meeting because the boss doesn't trust you. Sometimes it can even get physical in a way, tampering with your workspace, erasing files, moving items, all designed to make you feel insecure, confused, like you're losing your mind.
And this whole thing is often intensified by that honeymoon phase you mentioned, the cycle of cruelty and then sudden kindness.
Yes, that intermittent reinforcement is key. Those periods of cruelty are followed by a sudden 180-degree turn to kindness and charm. This keeps the victim hooked, always hoping for that positive outcome, believing maybe the relationship isn't really that bad after all. But it just sows more confusion and uncertainty. It creates this totally warped concept of love that traps them in what feels like perpetual bondage.
So if these examples are ringing bells for anyone listening, what are the signs within themselves that they might be a victim of gaslighting? What's the impact on their mental health?
Right, recognizing the internal signs is vital. Things like consistently low self-esteem, constantly questioning yourself, your memory, your actions, even your sanity. Difficulty making even simple decisions, feeling like a constant failure no matter what you do, constantly apologizing for everything, hating confrontation, maybe even lying to avoid conflict, finding yourself acting against your own morals just to keep the peace, having that nagging gut feeling that something is deeply wrong but you can't quite put your finger on it, feeling perpetually nervous or anxious around the narcissist, and maybe an overwhelming feeling that there's just no way out.
Okay. Now, the source also discusses how narcissists seem particularly attracted to empaths. Why is that? What creates that toxic combination?
It's a deeply manipulative dynamic. The narcissist essentially feeds off the empath's natural desire to connect, their compassion, their attention. That's prime narcissistic supply. They quickly realize they get even more supply, more reaction when the empath is upset or trying to fix things, when they're in their bad books, so to speak. This often kicks off a cycle of control and emotionally abusive, demeaning comments. The empath, being highly sensitive and often prone to self-reflection, instinctively tries harder. They think, if I just love them more, if I understand them better, things will get better.
But it never does it?
No, it's never enough. The narcissist just keeps taking and taking until the empath is completely drained, emotionally depleted, with nothing left to give.
And this inevitably leads to one of two painful outcomes for the empath.
Yeah, generally one of two things happens. Either the empath becomes so drained that the narcissist gets bored, the supply runs dry, and they just leave, often discard them quite cruelly. Or the empath has a crucial moment of clarity, an epiphany, and finds the strength to break free themselves. Either way, the relationship is ultimately destined for failure because it was never built on genuine connection. And a critical concept to understand here is trauma bonding.
Trauma bonding, explain that.
It's what makes leaving feel so impossible despite the obvious damage. That relentless push-pull cycle, the idealization where they make you feel amazing, followed by the devaluation where they tear you down, creates a powerful, confusing bond. Narcissists are experts at exploiting an empath's willingness to self-reflect, to look at their own faults. They twist it so the victim constantly blames themselves for the abuse. So even if the empath intuitively senses their partner is a narcissist, the abusive nature of the bond itself makes breaking free incredibly difficult. It feels like an addiction.
The book calls it an arousal jag, where the narcissist strategically gives happiness, then takes it away, over and over again. How does that chaos become addictive?
While the narcissist gets a thrill from creating and controlling this chaos, they often juggle multiple partners to intensify this factor, but for the victim, it becomes almost physiological. This psychological abuse is like a slow-acting poison. Starts subtle, maybe insults disguised as jokes, then escalates. Victims convince themselves the narcissist's horrible behavior is just out of character, or worse, that they somehow provoked it. They start thinking, if I just behave better, they'll be nice again. This cycle leads to an addiction to the abuse itself. It's driven by a biological addiction to the hormonal roller coaster. You get cortisol, the stress hormone, flooding your system during the punishment phases. Then, during the brief moments of affection or making up, you get a rush of dopamine, the reward hormone. Your body literally gets hooked on those highs, making you crave the good times even more intensely after the bad.
That's terrifying. A biological addiction to the abuse cycle.
It is. And this constant stress takes a devastating physical toll, too. It can manifest in things like chronic acne, chest pains, unexplained autoimmune disorders, arthritis-like pain, migraines, a severely weakened immune system. Your body is screaming for help.
So why do victims stay?
Intense confusion, self-blame, that trauma bond we talked about. Often the only way out seems to be when the narcissist themselves decides to discard the victim, usually because the victim can no longer provide the supply they need. They're too drained, too broken. And as painful as that discard is, it can sometimes be the catalyst. It finally allows the grieving process to begin and, crucially, the dawning realization that nothing that happened was actually their fault.
Okay, so that leads us into healing. What about situations where the narcissist is a parent? That seems like a uniquely difficult dynamic to escape or heal from.
Absolutely. When a parent is a narcissist, it's particularly insidious because it shapes your entire worldview from childhood. These parents often live through their children. They might be overly possessive, or they might marginalize one child while idealizing another, or they might directly compete with their children, feeling threatened by any sign of their independence. Fundamentally, they just cannot love their children for who they truly are, only for how the child reflects on them.
And what specific manipulation tactics do they use? You mentioned some earlier with gaslighting.
Yeah, they use a whole range. Shaming is common, direct blame, sometimes horrific things like, I wish you were never born. Relentless guilt trips, unreasonable pressure to achieve, you will get that, A or else. Negative comparison to siblings or other children, manipulative use of punishment or reward, like making financial support contingent on choosing the career they want for you, and just pervasive emotional coercion. At its core, it's conditional love. Love is only given when the child meets the parent's needs or expectations.
And the image thing is big too, right?
Huge. Such parents are often utterly obsessed with maintaining a superficial image of perfection. They'll publicly parade whatever they think makes their family look superior, especially now with social media. They can be incredibly touchy and inflexible, needing to control every minor detail of their child's behavior. And they can fly into a rage when any boundary, however small, is crossed. Some expect their children to remain dependent on them financially or emotionally for life. They get possessive and intensely jealous of a child's growing independence or, especially, romantic partners, seeing them as direct threats to their control. And then there are others who just neglect their children, too self-absorbed in their own lives and activities to genuinely care or provide support.
Wow. So despite the different styles, the common thread is that profound lack of empathy.
But
How do children raised in these environments typically react or cope? What are the outcomes?
they react in various ways, often quite heartbreakingly. Some become what the literature calls defeated. They might struggle with depression, deep self-hating, and become prone to addiction later in life. Others become rebellious. Maybe they become overachievers, relentlessly driven to prove their worth, constantly seeking the validation they never got. Some become angry, and this is concerning. They might internalize the abusive patterns and potentially become malignant narcissists themselves, sadly perpetuating the cycle. And then there's the golden child, the one who is idealized, put on a pedestal. Sounds good, maybe, but they often struggle profoundly with accepting their own flaws, developing a stable identity, and may secretly resist the suffocating role they've been forced into.
That's a heavy burden for a child.
Yeah.
So if someone listening realizes, my parent is or was narcissistic, what's the path forward? It's not their job to fix the parent, right?
Absolutely not. That's the fundamental truth you have to grasp. It is not your responsibility to help or fix your narcissistic parent. Your focus needs to be on your own healing. First, learn about the condition. Understanding NPD can help depersonalize the abuse. Accept the painful possibility that they may never change. Recognize if the other parent was or is an enabler, someone who passively or actively supported the narcissist's behavior. Understand that those family roles, golden child, scapegoat, lost child, mascot, can be fluid. You might have occupied different roles at different times. The most crucial part is reconnecting with your own feelings, which were likely suppressed or invalidated for years. Stop any self-harming behaviors, whether physical or emotional, and become aware of your own potential attraction to narcissistic partners in adulthood. It's a common pattern. Accept your complex, often conflicting feelings towards your parent. It's okay to feel anger, sadness, maybe even pity all at once. And if needed, make the difficult decision to break contact entirely or set very strict, unwavering boundaries if contact must continue.
And there's something called narcissistic fleas, picking up their traits.
Yes, that's a really important point. Be mindful of narcissistic fleas inadvertently picking up some of their toxic behaviors, like maybe having a quick temper, being overly critical, or using manipulation yourself. It's a defense mechanism sometimes, but one you need to unlearn.
It sounds like while we can't choose how we're raised, we absolutely can choose how we react moving forward, allowing that pain to maybe propel us towards healing and purpose rather than letting it define us?
Exactly. That's the choice you have. Now let's talk about breaking free more generally, whether it's a parent, partner, friend, boss. This is the hard part, often the hardest, but it's absolutely necessary for your own well-being and future happiness. Judy Dyer really emphasizes this. You must become immune to their egocentrism.
Immune. How?
It means consciously choosing to live independently of their opinions and judgments. Don't let their arguments drain your precious energy. And most importantly, as we discussed with supply, stop giving them compliments, attention, or praise. Cut off the fuel. That's vital.
Okay, cut off the supply. What else? Keep interaction short.
Keep conversations incredibly short and purely factual if you must interact. Do not get drawn into emotional debates. Do not stoop to their level. They are masters at manipulation and Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And you will lose that game. Once you consistently stop providing that supply, they will likely get bored or frustrated and move on to find it elsewhere. However, be prepared. They will almost certainly slander your name to their new victims or their social circle to paint you as the problem. Don't let it derail you. And please, never fall for their pity ploys or sudden remorse. It's almost always calculated. They only genuinely feel distress when their supply runs out, not from true guilt about their actions.
Right. So the ultimate goal is no contact if possible.
Yes, no contact is the gold standard if it's feasible and safe. This means blocking them everywhere. All social media, email, text, phone. No exceptions. Don't leave any gaps. Don't read old messages or emails. They will use pleas, promises, anger, guilt trips, anything to lure you back into their web. And internalize this. You cannot change a narcissist. You simply do not have that power. The only person you can ever truly change is yourself.
And part of that self-change involves accepting a really hard truth, doesn't it? That they probably never truly loved you, not in a healthy, genuine way.
Yes, because genuine love isn't inherently evil or cruel. It doesn't seek to destroy. Accepting this, while incredibly painful, frees you from wasting energy dwelling on what could have been. Use that energy instead to reaffirm your own worthiness of real, unconditional love, and keep educating yourself. Read books, articles, listen to talks, develop that high-powered radar to spot the red flags early next time.
And if no contact just isn't possible, maybe you share children or work together.
Right. If you absolutely cannot go full no contact, you need to practice what some call gray rock. And take space from them whenever possible, even short breaks, just to gain perspective and reset your emotional equilibrium.
Gray rock, or as the source puts it, feed them with a long-handled spoon, keeping your distance.
Exactly, metaphorically keeping your distance. Interestingly, narcissists often do respect boundaries, but only when they are enforced consistently and firmly. That distance also prevents them from easily twisting your words against you.
Okay, so what are some specific strategies for setting and maintaining those boundaries if you have to interact?
Okay, some specific tactics. First, keep your limits clear and concise. State very clearly what you will and won't tolerate. For example, I will not continue this conversation if you raise your voice or insult me. If they cross the line, disengage immediately. Hang up, walk away. No further explanation, no JDE. Justify, argue, defend, explain.
Just decisive action.
Yes. Second, change the subject strategically. If they start asking intrusive, uncomfortable questions or trying to provoke you, pivot the conversation. Steer it towards a topic they love talking about, usually themselves, their achievements, their opinions. It redirects their focus. Third, don't give too much information. Be concise. The less personal information or emotional reaction you give them, the less ammunition they have to use against you later. Respond with firm but neutral, brief statements like, I'm confident in my decision, or, okay, I've noted your opinion, full stop. And fourth, sometimes you can name what they are doing calmly, directly, but without accusation or emotion, call out the behavior. I notice that anytime I start talking about myself, you interrupt me, or that sounded like you were trying to put me down just then. State the fact, then leave it. Don't get drawn into arguing about it.
So this whole approach is the gray rock method, becoming uninterested.
Essentially, yes. You become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and impenetrable as a gray rock. You consciously tone down your reactions, your emotional expression around them, reserve your real engagement, your vulnerability for safe, healthy people in your life. Reacting emotionally, getting angry, upset, defensive, showing that vulnerability just gives them the green light. It shows them they can still get a reaction, still get supply, but be patient with yourself implementing this. It takes practice. You will slip up sometimes. Just acknowledge it, learn from it, and get back to being the gray rock next time.
It sounds like it requires immense discipline and repetition. Because narcissists will constantly test those boundaries, won't they?
Constantly. You will likely need to reestablish your boundaries again and again, and be prepared for potential backlash or consequences. They might spread rumors, try to turn others against you, threaten to cut you off financially or socially. You have to choose your battles wisely and stand firm on the ones that matter most for your well-being.
Okay, let's talk about arguments. Fighting with a narcissist feels impossible. Why is it so uniquely challenging?
It is uniquely challenging, largely due to their extreme hypersensitivity to any perceived criticism, that narcissistic injury we talked about, combined with their profound lack of empathy. They are essentially wired to be defensive and often abusive in conflict. They will take offense at the slightest misunderstanding, real or imagined, and their reactions can be extreme. Stonewalling, silent treatment, screaming, name-calling, or even, bizarrely, finding someone else to sleep with as a way to punish you or regulate their own emotions.
So the first rule of fighting a narcissist should probably be,
Don't even try to win. Seriously. You never will, not in the conventional sense. They will never admit they're wrong or take genuine responsibility. It's just not in their playbook.
okay, so if winning isn't the goal, what is? De-escalation, survival.
De-escalation and self-preservation, exactly. And sometimes a surprisingly strategic approach, though it might feel counterintuitive or even inauthentic, is to show a form of empathy. See something like, wow, what I did must have been very hurtful for you. I can understand why you are so angry right now.
Even if you know you did nothing wrong.
Even then, it suggests you're taking responsibility, which feeds their ego and need to be right. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but it can often de-escalate the situation quickly because you're validating their feeling, which is all they care about.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. And definitely don't take the bait for revenge, right? Ignore the insults.
Absolutely. Do not take the bait. Ignore their comments about your perceived flaws, your selfishness, whatever accusations they throw out. Responding, defending yourself just fuels another argument loop. You're playing their game again. And crucially, don't expect an apology afterwards. Don't ask them to process what happened or talk about their behavior. They are deeply, deeply uncomfortable confronting their own actions and motivations and will simply deflect, deny, or blame you again.
Got it. Preserve yourself, de-escalate if possible, don't expect a resolution. Now, let's pivot fully to healing for the victim. What does that journey look like after escaping?
For victims, the core of healing involves taking responsibility for yourself, not for the abuse, but for your own recovery and putting your own well-being first, maybe for the first time in a long time. It requires emotionally detaching from that deeply ingrained need or hope that you can somehow rescue or change the narcissist. You cannot. Only they can choose to seek help and change, and most never do.
So this journey is really about rescuing your own self-respect, your sanity. Cultivating self-acceptance and self-compassion after all that erosion. Judy Dyer offers several strategies for this, right?
She does. Powerful strategies. First and foremost, allow yourself to grieve. Even though leaving is ultimately a good and necessary thing, you will mourn. You'll mourn the loss of the relationship, yes, but also the loss of the illusion, the future you thought you had. Allow yourself to go through the classic 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. There's absolutely no time limit on this process. Be patient with yourself.
That's important. What else?
Some find a burial ceremony helpful. It's optional, of course, but symbolically burying or burning belongings associated with the narcissist can be a powerful ritual for closure for some people. Then consciously work to live in the moment. Stop ruminating on the past, on what could have been, or trying to make sense of the senseless. Understand and internalize that the abuse was about them and their disorder, not about any inherent flaw in you. Focus on your present feelings, needs, and experiences.
Processing those emotions must be huge.
Absolutely. Process your emotions healthily. Acknowledge the difficult feelings as they come up: loneliness, depression, rage, confusion. Don't suppress them. Find healthy outlets. Physical activities can be incredibly therapeutic. Martial arts, running, dancing, anything that helps release that pent-up pain and frustration from your body. And crucially, reconnect with loved ones. Narcissists work hard to isolate their victims. Reach out to the trusted friends and family you may have distanced yourself from. Explain what happened, if you feel able. Consider joining support groups for survivors of domestic or emotional abuse. Connecting with others who truly understand can be incredibly validating and healing.
The source also mentions unlearning old habits.
Yes, unlearn old habits with self-monitoring. In that relationship, you likely learned unhealthy coping mechanisms, like maybe normalizing abusive behavior, walking on eggshells constantly, or neglecting your own needs. Use self-monitoring to become aware of these habits. You can do it qualitatively. What do these habits look like? How do they feel when they happen? And quantitatively, maybe count how often you apologize unnecessarily, for instance. Keep a journal of your thoughts, feelings, and the triggers that activate these old patterns. Awareness is the first step to change.
What about rebuilding a sense of self?
Definitely. Invest in yourself. Pursue those long-held dreams, hobbies, educational qualifications, or career goals that you might have put on hold during the relationship. Reclaim your identity, your passions, your sense of purpose outside of them. And finally, maybe most importantly, learn to trust yourself again. Reconnect with your intuition, your gut instincts. Those instincts likely warned you early on that something was wrong, but the gaslighting taught you to ignore them. Practice listening to that inner voice again. Your intuition is a powerful guide back to yourself.
That's a comprehensive path. Now, a really sensitive topic, dating again after narcissistic abuse. What's the advice there?
Yeah, Judy Dyer acknowledges this is sensitive, but it's also an essential part of moving forward for many people. Her main advice is simple but crucial. Start incredibly slow. Do not rush into anything. Give yourself time to heal first.
And be on high alert for red flags, presumably.
Yeah.
All the ones we've discussed.
Absolutely. Look out for all those red flags. Possessiveness, constant criticism, even subtle digs about your appearance, how they treat service staff or others, bad-mouthing all their exes, any controlling behaviors, that excessive charm that feels a bit too good to be true. Listen to your gut. If you spot those flags early, run. Don't make excuses for them. Also, keep your options open initially. Don't feel pressure to jump into an exclusive relationship with the first person who seems nice or ticks all the boxes. Take your time getting to know people. And try, as hard as it is, not to judge every new potential partner based solely on your previous traumatic experience. Remember, while narcissistic traits exist on a spectrum, full-blown NPD affects around 10% of the population, maybe less. Most people aren't narcissists. Interestingly, the source suggests that being bold and confident actually deters narcissists. They tend to look for specific types they perceive as easier to manipulate. So reclaiming your confidence is protective.
That's empowering. What about getting input from others?
Yes, definitely. Get a second opinion from trusted friends and family. People who genuinely have your best interests at heart might see red flags you miss, especially early on when you might be susceptible to charm again. Listen to their concerns. And one final practical piece of advice from the source. Don't sleep with someone until you've both established a level of serious commitment and trust. If they pressure you or can't wait, they're probably not a keeper anyway. It's about respecting your own boundaries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. How do we wrap this up? What are the absolute key takeaways?
Well, this deep dive really has only scratched the surface, hasn't it? Narcissism is complex. But I hope listeners now have a much deeper, more nuanced understanding. It is absolutely more than just a casual insult. It's a rare and, frankly, heartbreaking personality disorder. And a key reality is that a truly narcissistic individual, someone with clinical NPD, likely won't ever acknowledge their wrongdoing or offer a genuine, heartfelt apology. It's just not how they're wired.
And while you absolutely do not have to tolerate their behavior, especially if they refuse to even acknowledge it, let alone change getting a narcissist out of your life, or managing interactions safely if you can't leave, is incredibly difficult. But it is unequivocally necessary for your own chance at a peaceful, fulfilling life.
What's perhaps saddest, in a way, is that narcissists themselves often end up profoundly lonely and depressed later in life, because they genuinely believe deep down that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with them. The problem is always external, which means they will likely never seek the kind of intensive help they desperately need because they simply cannot acknowledge they have a problem to begin with.
So, to really boil it down, a true narcissist likely has clinical NPD. It seems more men than women are diagnosed, but it affects everyone. Around 10% of the population might suffer from it, with varying levels of severity. Their main characteristics: grandiosity, that inflated sense of self-importance, a constant driving need for validation. They are often master manipulators and emotional abusers. They frequently end up alone because they push everyone away and won't accept their part in it. They seem drawn to empaths, creating that incredibly toxic dynamic. The cause: still debated, maybe childhood, maybe genetics, likely a mix. And beneath the mask, deep insecurity and low self-esteem.
Exactly. And remember, you cannot change or fix a narcissist. They must acknowledge their own problem first, which is rare. Leaving such a relationship is incredibly challenging, often traumatic. Professional help therapy is frequently essential for healing from the deep emotional abuse. especially the insidious effects of gaslighting. And never ever allow a narcissist or anyone else to make you feel guilty for leaving or setting boundaries to protect yourself. Your emotional and psychological well-being is paramount. Always.
Ultimately, this journey isn't about them anymore. It's about reclaiming your life. Instead of allowing the pain, whether from a narcissistic parent or partner, to destroy you, you absolutely can choose to allow it to propel you into your true purpose. Because the best revenge, if you want to call it that, isn't about hurting them back. It's about your own success, your own growth, your own healing, and finding genuine, healthy, unconditional love. We really hope this deep dive has given you some powerful tools for navigating your world. Until next time.